Hey guys, tonight, a father made his son a promise he should never have kept. The boy had one question that had haunted him his entire life. The answer would either prove he was divine or kill him. His father knew what would happen. He begged, he warned, he wept. But a promise to a god cannot be broken. Get that pillow just right, because here we go. This is what happens when you discover the truth about yourself might destroy everything else. If you enjoy tonight's story, please leave a like, as it would mean the world to me. Now, let's begin. Phaethon could not remember when the teasing began, only that it grew louder as he did. In the market square, boys called him fatherless, their laughter sharp as flint. His mother, Clymene, answered gently, yet her eyes betrayed a truth that would not be quiet. "You are the son of the sun," she told him, brushing dust from his shoulders. But her words felt like smoke, beautiful, untouchable, and impossible to prove. One evening, after the shadows had lengthened and the cicadas sang of heat, Phaethon stood by the well and stared east. There, beyond the deserts and the whispering reeds, lay the palace where day begins. If he could stand before Helios himself, no boy in the square would ever laugh again. The thought took root like a seed dropped in fertile soil. Before the first light touched the rooftops, he began his journey. The air still held the cool of night as he walked past sleeping houses. Dogs raised their heads but did not bark. Perhaps they too sensed a destiny unfolding. Days passed. He crossed fields where farmers worked from first light until the stars returned, and he listened to their songs of harvest and of gods. He waded through rivers that glittered with the sky's reflection, and camped beneath olive trees whose leaves whispered of secrets older than men. Each night he rehearsed what he would say, words of proof, of challenge, of a son demanding to be known. At last, the horizon blazed with a glow that did not belong to any dawn he had seen. The very air thickened with light. Shadows shrank, and the sand beneath his feet warmed as though the sun had already risen. He knew he had reached the gates of the sun. Two colossal doors of polished bronze loomed before him. Upon them were etched the turning of the seasons: spring's blossoms, summer's wheat, autumn's fruit, winter's bare branches, all captured in living metal. They pulsed with warmth, as if the stories carved there still breathed. Phaethon laid a hand upon the door and felt heat travel up his arm. "Father," he called, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Let me in." The bronze parted with a low, singing groan. A corridor of gold opened before him, each step lit from beneath, as if the floor itself held captured sunrise. At its far end, upon a throne that glowed like the heart of a furnace, sat Helios. The god's eyes were the color of high noon, blinding, and yet strangely kind. Around his head, a crown of living fire burned without smoke. The air shimmered with the scent of warm cedar and distant rain. "Phaethon," Helios said, and the name rolled through the hall like the tolling of a bell. "You have come far." "I had to," the boy answered. "They say I lie when I speak of you. They say no god would claim me." Helios studied him, the golden light softening. "Men fear what they cannot see. Their words are not your measure." "Then swear it," Phaethon said, voice tightening. "Swear by the Styx that you will grant me one request and let the world hear it." A murmur ran through the attendants of dawn. Aurora with her rose-red fingers, the hours who guide the seasons. They knew the weight of an oath upon the Styx. Even the gods cannot break it. Helios rose. By the river that binds the heavens, he swore the ancient words, his voice a quiet thunder. "One request, my son. Name it." Phaethon did not hesitate. "Let me drive the chariot of the sun for one day." The hall stilled, as though the stars themselves had forgotten to breathe. Aurora lowered her gaze. The hours folded their hands. Helios's golden brow furrowed. "Ask for jewels," the god said slowly. "A crown bright as noon, a token that will silence every doubt." Helios stepped closer, his brilliance softening like sunset. "This is no simple ride. The horses are wild with fire and know only my hands. Too high, and the earth will freeze. Too low, and it will burn. Monsters of the sky guard the path, the bull, the lion, the scorpion. Even I, who have driven them since time began, must hold the middle course with care." "You swore," Phaethon said quietly. The oath hung between them like an unbreakable chain. Helios closed his eyes, and when he opened them, grief and pride were bound together. "So be it," he said. "But hear me. Keep the middle course. Do not climb to touch the stars. Do not sink to warm the sea. Do not let the horses feel your fear." Phaethon's heart leapt. "I will do as you say." Helios laid a hand on his son's shoulder. "If the chariot veers and you cannot master it, let go. I will take the reins. There is no shame in saving the world." "I will not fail," Phaethon whispered. Helios said nothing. He turned toward the stables where the star horses stamped and snorted, their breath the color of flame. The day was about to begin. Steam rose from the star horses' backs in little ghosts that drifted up and vanished in the bright air. Grooms moved around them with quiet hands, fastening rings to gilded traces, smoothing the leather where heat might bite. Phaethon stood a pace away, feeling their breath on his skin like waves of summer. Helios lifted a bridle, the metal fittings glowing without melting. "Say their names," he told his son, "and say them as if you expect to be obeyed." Phaethon nodded. "Eos." The nearest horse flicked an ear and leaned his long face forward until Phaethon could touch the warm cheek. "Aethiops." The second tossed his head in a playful arc and snorted sparks no bigger than fireflies. Brontis. The third stamped once, measured and solid. Steropos. The last let out a breath that sounded like a low chord on a stringed instrument. "They know you now," Helios said. "Listen, and they'll tell you what they need." He showed Phaethon the reins, 4 lines gathered into 2, yet each with a mind of its own. "You don't fight them," he said. "You offer them a path. If they surge, give them the edge and invite them back. If they shy, open your hands and set a truer point. Hands steady, wrists soft, shoulders down." Phaethon mirrored his father's posture. "Like this?" "Better." Helios lifted the left rein with 2 fingers. "This is how you ask Eos to straighten without insulting him." He shifted the right rein of his hair. "And this is how you let Aethiops keep his pride while he stops drifting." The chariot waited in the arch. Its wheels sunk a finger's depth into the warm stone. Up close, it looked less like a vehicle than a promise kept. Curved rails the color of wheat at noon, a floor of hammered light, a rail high enough to brace a knee against when the sky turned argumentative. "Climb in," Helios said. Phaethon stepped up. The floor hummed under his sandals. He took the reins, and their weight surprised him. Not heavy like water, not quick like rope, something alive between. Helios came to stand behind him, one hand near Phaethon's shoulder, the other resting light on the rail. "If you lose the course, let go. I will take them. Do you understand?" "Yes," Phaethon said, and meant it in that moment, because there's a difference between a promise in a hall and a promise with horses breathing smoke in your face. "Gates," Helios called. The bronze doors sighed open. Dawn pressed against the threshold, then poured through. The horses gathered themselves. Phaethon felt the pull down the reins, into his hands, through his wrists, into his ribs, as if his bones had been threaded to the team. "Now," Helios said. They moved. The chariot rolled from the arch, and the world bent to meet it. Wind lifted Phaeton's hair and laid it back in a clean line. The first rush of height took his stomach and then gave it back. The palace dropped away. The sky became a road no one else could see. For a few breaths, all he needed to do was breathe and hold. The wheels sang. The team found their stride. Below, rivers turned from pewter to silver to bright white. On distant roofs, women pushed shutters open and blinked. A fisherman on a low boat looked up and shaded his eyes with a grin that had no reason and needed none. "Middle course," said Helios, "not more, not less." Phaethon murmured, "Middle course," and felt how the words steadied his hands. He gathered Eos a finger's width and allowed Aethiops a hair of play, and the chariot slid into a sweeter line, like a blade finding the center of a groove. They passed over a stand of pines. Needles flashed, the tops lifted and settled as if bowing. A child on a path pointed with both hands, hopping with a joy that made no demands. The mother laughed and failed to scold. "Do you feel the thinness?" Helios asked. Phaethon tasted metal at the back of his tongue. "Yes." "It tempts you to climb. Don't. A little higher and the world begins to shiver. Keep your weight through your heels. Let your hands float." Phaethon did as told, and the horses answered by relaxing into the reins without slack. He could feel the difference. No dragging, no arguing, only agreement. A soft prickle ran along his forearms. "What's that?" "Scorpius lifting his tail," Helios said. "Open your right hand. Let the arc widen, then show them the point beyond." Phaethon eased the right rein and pictured a line that ran cleanly to safety. The team leaned into it. The sting in the air faded, not fully gone, but content to let them pass. "Good," Helios said. The word landed light, like a coin in a dish. For a while, the sky was simple. Phaethon learned small things that felt like winning, that Steropus calmed if he said the name under his breath, that Brontes appreciated a steadier contact than the others, that if Aethiops got bored, he would invent work by drifting, and the cure was to give him a job before he took one. He learned the tone of the Axle's song when everything was correct. Below, a market came awake. A woman lifted a basket of figs, chose one, changed her mind, and smiled. Two boys raced along a wall and nearly collided with a goat. Neither fell, both swore solemn oaths never to tell their mothers. In a field, an old man leaned on his hoe and watched the light tilt toward his rows the way a friend arrives early. "Tell me something true," Helios said, "not as a test, more as a thread to hold." Phaethon considered. "I like being seen." "Most of us do," Helios said, "but the horses don't care about applause, only hands." "I know." Phaethon tightened the left rein to keep Eos honest and felt the small satisfaction that comes when a strong thing agrees with you. The lion's starry mane rippled at the edge of their path. Phaethon felt the gaze between his shoulders and did not look long. He held his line. The horses flicked their ears and went on. They glided above a scatter of islands that looked like stones thrown into a bowl of paint. Sails whitened below them. From somewhere rose the smell of bread, or perhaps Phaethon imagined it, because men were breaking their fasts, and that is what mornings smell like when they go right. Helios passed a water skin forward. "Drink." Phaethon took a swallow and almost choked on the realization that he had forgotten to be thirsty. He swallowed again, handed it back, and breathed. "Another true thing," Helios said. Phaethon watched the way Aethiop's shoulder flickered with excess energy. "I'm afraid of being nobody more than I'm afraid of falling." Helios's hand pressed the rail once, a small acknowledgement. "Don't let that fear hold the reins." "I won't," Phaethon said, and for this stretch he didn't. They dipped slightly as the air thickened. Heat rose, honest and heavy. Far below lay a river that braided through pale sand and then hid its mouth in reeds. Phaethon's body wanted to correct that unnecessary bend, as if straightening it from the sky would tidy something inside him. He smiled at himself and let the river be. "Down a touch," Helios murmured. Phaethon softened his knees, allowed an inch, and felt the world accept it. A shepherd pulled his cloak tighter against a new cool and looked up with a pleased frown, the face men make when the weather is doing exactly what their bones predicted. The quiet between them was easy now. Phaethon's hands learned to think before his thoughts did. He corrected tiny faults before they became arguments. He found he had time to look, truly look, at the line of coast that cupped a bay, at a flock of birds changing direction as if a single mind steered them, at his own shadow skimming across a mountain face and then dissolving in the bright. "Do you still want the world to know your name?" Helios asked after a long while. "Yes," Phaethon said, "but right now I want Eos to stop leaning." He made a micro-adjustment and laughed when the horse answered as if they'd planned it. "There." "That," Helios said, "is a better want." They went on like that, teacher and student, father and son, God and boy, each learning the other's rhythms. Phaethon began to believe not only that he could hold the middle course, but that the middle course could hold him back, a hand between his shoulder blades reminding him to breathe. Ahead, the road of sky brightened, not dangerously, just enough to demand respect. Phaethon narrowed his focus without tightening. The horses reached. He gave. They took. He took back. Agreement. The axle sang the true note again. "Good," Helios said softly. "Good," Phaethon echoed, and the word felt earned. The morning opened wider. The kind of wide that invites you to think you deserve it. Phaethon felt that too, the warm tug where pride begins. He acknowledged it and did not feed it. Not yet. He eased the reins a breath and set his jaw to a line that had nothing to prove. Wind slid over his face like cool cloth. The sea shone like a plate. Somewhere below, two lovers met in a doorway and decided to try again. Somewhere else, a child dropped a cup and it didn't break, and he decided it meant the day would be kind. Phaethon kept the horses honest, the course true, the promise alive. He dared, just once, to glance back. Helios stood steady, hands near the rail, not on it. Pride was there, in the set of his mouth, and worry too, but under both, something like relief. "Keep going," Helios said. "I will," Phaethon answered, and for the length of a song, he believed the world would let him. The line of the sky changed without warning. One heartbeat, it was a smooth road. The next, it was a path laid across restless water. Phaethon felt the tremor run down the reins and into his wrists. The horse's ears flicked forward, then back, then forward again. "Stay with them," Helios said, quiet but close. "Invite them to the middle." Phaethon breathed out and gave the smallest adjustment he knew. Eos settled. Brontes answered with a steadier pull. Aethiops fidgeted, then remembered his job. Steropus needed his name once under the breath. Phaethon gave it, and felt the horse soften. The stars around them were no longer decorative. The bull's broad brow lifted as if a thought had occurred. The lion rolled a shoulder and watched. Farther off, the scorpion's tail rose, not fully, just enough to remind them it could. "I see it," Phaethon said. "Good," Helios replied. "See it and do not chase it. The path is the point." They slid between opinions written in light. The axle sang its correct note. Below, a field of barley offered its green to the day and received exactly enough warmth to answer. A woman at a window stretched and found that her back did not hurt. She smiled, a small, private victory. Then the air thinned, not to cold, but to a kind of shine that made distance lie. The team felt it and reached. The chariot rose a hand's breadth too high. "Down," Helios said. Phaethon asked for down. The horses resisted a fraction, then agreed. The chariot returned to the lane, and the shine let them go. Pride warmed Phaethon's face. He had felt the wrongness before it shouted. He had corrected it before it became a problem. "Good hands," Helios said. "Thank you," Phaethon answered, and the words tasted better than figs. They crossed a scatter of islands. Sailors on a high-decked ship paused to stare. One made a sign against bad luck, then laughed at himself and waved instead. Children on a sandy point leaped, trying to touch the light with their fingertips, and failing, settled for touching each other's shoulders. The scorpion's sting brightened. The path narrowed to a stripe. "Let him have his shadow," murmured. "Widen, then show them the far point." Phaethon widened. Patient, patient, patient. The tail hovered. He gave the far point, and the team turned to it like thirsty things finding a stream. The tail sank back into its arc. They exhaled together. For a few breaths, everything behaved. The next shift came like a sudden crowding. Winds gathered without warning, not storms, just a pressure from 3 directions at once. The horses raised their heads and their backs went tight. Phaethon felt the string of panic pull at his chest. He ignored it. "With me," he told the team, "with me." He smoothed the left rein, lifted the right, moved his hands as if he were persuading a friend, not ordering a soldier. The pressure broke into something he could use. The horses stretched into a truer rhythm. "That was well done," Helios said. "Remember it." "I will." They came upon the lion again, closer this time. Its mane lifted, threads of fire rippling. Its mouth opened a little, not a roar, only breath. The breath had weight. The weight wanted to push them aside. "Hold your lane," Helios said. Phaethon held. The horses believed him. They passed with a whisper of heat across their faces. Phaethon's eyes stung. He did not blink until they were clear. "Drink," Helios said. Phaethon took a mouthful and another. He passed the skin back and checked the line. The axle song returned to true. The day went on. The visible earth below softened to a patchwork of stories he could not hear, and for a while that was a comfort. His fingers knew the work. The team trusted the pattern. He had room to notice his own breath and to make it slower. Then the high, thin air called to him again. He did not intend to answer. He intended only to taste the edge of it, to show himself that he could go near and not be fooled. He raised his hands a sliver. The chariot climbed the height of a man. "Enough," Helios said. Phaethon eased down. The cold arrived late, like a guest who had lost the road but found the house anyway. A long lake flashed with a skin of ice at one end, too sudden for the fish to understand. A shepherd frowned and drew his cloak around the lamb across his shoulders. "See what one hand's breath does?" Helios said. "I see," Phaethon said, and shame pricked his neck. "I won't do it again." "Say that less and listen more," Helios replied, and left it there. They held the middle. The sea glittered without malice. The smell of bread rose from a town they could not name. The team moved as if the road had been made for them alone. The next mistake was not Phaethon's. A wind off the desert rose with no courtesy and shoved at their knees. The horses felt sand without seeing it and wanted lower air. They dropped a hand's breath too far, then another, and then heat leapt like a dog that has been waiting to be called. "Up," Helios said, already shifting. "I have it," Phaethon answered, and lifted too quickly. The horses braced and fought the suddenness. The chariot jolted. The axle's song went false. "Steady," Helios warned. Phaethon steadied. The team unlocked, but the heat had tasted its chance. Below, a line of young pines browned at the tips. A farmer in a straw hat stood, felt the wrongness on his face, and ran with a bucket that had never seemed small until now. "Up another breath," Helios said, "not more." Phaethon gave the breath. The pines held. Smoke thought about it and then thought better. They moved on, but the world was less forgiving now. The scorpion's tail returned where it should not have been. The lion stared with interest it had not earned. The bull pawed. None of them attacked. All of them watched. Phaethon's mouth went dry. "Why are they different?" "Because they can be," Helios said. "Keep your hands. The path is the point." They kept it, and for a stretch that felt longer than it was, the sky allowed it. Then the air stacked in layers, cool, warm, warmer, hottest, like blankets thrown in the wrong order. The team lost the exact place their feet should be. Aethiops tried to fix it by guessing. Eos tried to fix it by arguing. Brontes tried to fix it by slowing. Steropes tried to fix it by listening too hard to Phaethon's breath. "Quiet," Phaethon said, to them, to himself, to the layered air. He made his hands smaller, not bigger. He found the place in his wrists where control feels like kindness. The team took that kindness and found their feet again. A long sigh moved through the harness. "Better," Helios said. "Hold it." They held it. They would have held it longer, but pride arrived dressed as relief. Phaethon felt the ease and mistook it for victory. He dared a little flourish, no more than a smooth, shallow curve across an empty piece of sky where nothing could be harmed. The curve pleased Aethiops too much. He drifted. Eos corrected. Steropos thought the correction was his job and overcorrected. Brontes leaned into the wrong shoulder. The chariot tipped a fraction, and the fraction became a fact. The axle screamed. They dropped. Heat came up like a shout. A field crisped at the edges. A brook shrank to a shining ribbon and tried to hide under its banks. On a hillside, sheep bunched and ran as if one mind had chosen panic. "Up!" Helios barked. Phaethon hauled. The team threw their heads and fought the sudden pull. For 2 heartbeats there was nothing but struggle in the reins. No agreement, no language. "Down and then up," Helios commanded. "Give them room to stand, and then ask. Do it now." Phaethon obeyed. He let the team drop half a hand, felt their feet under them, and lifted with a plea instead of a demand. This time they came. The chariot climbed back into bearable air. Smoke rose behind them in a thin line. Phaethon stared at it until it blurred. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't say it. Pay attention," Helios answered, not unkind. "The world listens to your hands, not your mouth." They moved forward into a part of the day Phaethon had not reached in his dreams. The light was heavier, the decisions closer together. His shoulders ached, his palms burned. He did not complain. "Do you still want to be seen?" Helios asked after a time. "Yes," Phaethon said, and then because honesty had begun to teach him, but not like that. "Good," Helios said. The path tightened. The scorpion rose again, closer now, tail high, sting bright. The team shied. Phaethon opened his hands to widen and found the wind waiting to slap his palms. The widening turned into a lurch. The horses felt the lurch and chose flight over thought. The chariot swung low, the sea hissed, rocks split. In a city square, a fountain coughed steam and fell silent. "Let go," Helios said, reaching. Phaethon saw his father's hand, and something inside him locked. If he let go now, every boy in the market would win. Every laugh would be a prophecy. He tightened his grip until his knuckles burned. "Let go," Helios said again, softer. "I will take them." "No," Phaethon said, not loud, but final. The horses struck forward with the blind courage of strong animals. The road of sky bucked. The axle's song broke into a ragged cry. Below, a forest took the sun as a gift and became a chain of torches. "Phaethon," Helios whispered, grief already in the word. The boy set his feet wider and held on. The chariot no longer sang, it screamed. Wind tore at Phaethon's hair and pressed cold fingers beneath his tunic, as the sky pitched and heaved like a sea in revolt. Below, the world flinched beneath a sun too close. Forests browned in a breath. Rivers shrank into twisting silver scars. On the high plain of the north, ice cracked and bled away, as if spring had arrived in a single heartbeat. To the south, fields of grain hissed and bowed, then lifted smoke instead of seed. Helios reached for the reins again. Phaethon, let me take them. But the boy's jaw locked. Every insult from the market square rose in his ears, the laughter, the sneer of disbelief. If he released the reins now, every taunt would stand proven. No, he said, a word almost lost to the roar of the wind. The star horses sensed his defiance. Eos fought the bit. Aethiops lunged against the trace. Brontes and Steropes answered not with obedience, but with raw speed. The chariot plunged. A mountain peak below burst into flame, its snow crown vanishing in a hiss of steam. Birds wheeled in sudden silence, their cries drowned by the crackle of trees alight. Helios's voice cut through the chaos. Listen to me. The middle course is gone. Only ruin waits. But the boy's grip only hardened. He pulled, and the horses answered with a savage leap. The chariot skimmed so low that the seas themselves recoiled. Fish fled to their deepest caverns, and the wide Nile drew a veil of mud across its mouth to hide from the burning sky. "Higher!" Helios shouted, trying to guide through the boy's unyielding hands, "or the world will not survive this hour." Phaethon tugged back, but the horses no longer listened. They were creatures of fire. Fear made them stronger than any mortal could master. They surged upward in a single wild bound. The sudden climb threw the chariot into air too thin to breathe. The stars above flared white and cruel. Frost formed on the rims of distant lakes. The black soil of valleys turned brittle and rang like glass. People in the far north looked up and saw their breath crystallize before their eyes. The team swerved again, their terror spilling into every muscle. They dropped, then rose, then dropped once more in a zigzag that broke the order of the heavens. Constellations scattered from their appointed paths. The sky itself seemed to twist. On Olympus, the gods gathered, drawn by the stench of scorched earth and the cries of frightened rivers. Poseidon raised his trident from the deep. Artemis steadied the moon. But it was to Zeus that all eyes turned. The father of the gods stood at the threshold of the clouds, thunder already forming in the hollow of his hand. He saw the forests blaze, the seas boil, the mountains crack. He heard the rivers beg for mercy. "Enough," he said. Lightning coiled around his arm like a living thing. With one motion, he hurled it across the sky. The bolt struck with a sound beyond hearing. Light flooded the heavens brighter than any dawn. The chariot shuddered, the horses screamed, the reins in Phaethon's hands turned to smoke. Pain, sharp and sudden, tore through him. The world blurred into a single streak of fire. For a heartbeat, he felt weightless, the sky falling away beneath his feet. Then he was falling. Wind tore at him, not the playful rush of a ride, but the cold grasp of gravity. Clouds whipped past like torn banners. Below, the broad silver of the river Eridanus opened its arms. He struck the water with a hiss like iron plunged into the forge. The river closed over him, hiding the last ember of his flight. Helios drew the chariot back into its rightful path, his face a mask of grief. He steadied the horses with hands that had never shaken until this day. Slowly, the sun returned to its proper height, but the scars of the boy's journey were already written across the earth. On the banks of the Eridanus, the Heliades, Phaeton's sisters, came searching. They called his name until their voices broke. Day after day they wept beside the silent water, their tears falling like molten amber. And because grief too must change, the gods took pity, or perhaps simply set the world in order. The sisters' feet grew heavy, their arms stiffened, their hair turned to slender leaves. Before long, they stood as poplars, their tears hardening into golden resin that the river would carry forever. Cycnus, dearest friend to Phaeton, lingered by the banks long after the others had grown silent. His lament rose each evening like a thread of smoke. The gods turned him into a swan, so that his song might continue, soft and unbroken, across the still waters. Helios returned to his palace at the rim of the world. The horses cooled in their stalls, steam rising from their flanks like the last sigh of a storm. The sun god stood alone, crown dimmed, and for the first time the day's ending felt heavier than its beginning. High above, the stars resumed their appointed courses. The world, chastened and scarred, turned once more toward morning. Evening settled across the quiet river Eridanus, soft as a veil of ash after fire. The sky, cooled and tender, carried the faint scent of rain that had not yet fallen. Where Phaethon had plunged, the water still held a ghost of heat, a single thread of steam rising like an unanswered prayer. Along the banks, the newly formed poplars stood motionless. Their slender trunks gleamed with the first touch of starlight. Their leaves whispered, though no wind stirred. From their bark wept slow drops of golden resin, amber tears, each one a fragment of the sisters' endless mourning. Travelers who passed at dusk would sometimes hear what seemed to be voices caught in the branches, calling a name that the night refused to forget. Cycnus remained by the water long after all other mourners had gone. He came at dawn and at dusk, his feet blackened by the damp earth, his eyes fixed on the place where the river had claimed his friend. He sang the low, broken notes of grief until his throat gave out, and only the melody remained, wordless and clear. The gods, moved or simply resigned, transformed him so that his song might never end. His arms thinned into wings, his voice softened into the long, aching cry of a swan. When he slipped onto the water for the first time, the river cradled him like an old friend. From then on, each evening when the sky burned faintly with the memory of a fallen boy, the swan's song would drift across the dark, part lament, part blessing, a sound that made even the reeds bow. Helios returned to his eastern palace as the long night gathered. The chariot, now cooled, rested in its stall. The 4 fiery horses stood with heads low, their breath a gentle shimmer of light. No celebration greeted the sun god. The palace that had once blazed with triumph seemed hushed, the gold of its walls dulled to the color of late autumn. He removed his crown of fire and set it aside. For the first time since the first dawn, he felt the weight of his own light. It was not the fatigue of labor, but the ache of loss, the knowledge that even a god's love cannot shield a child from his own need to prove himself. Clymene, Phaeton's mother, came to the river when the news reached her. She knelt at the water's edge and pressed her palms into the mud until it darkened her skin. No words came, only the long, hollow sound of a heart that knows it can never be mended. The poplars bent toward her. A single drop of amber fell into her hands and hardened there like a small captured sun. Across the earth, the scars of Phaeton's ride remained. Forests blackened, riverbeds shrunken, mountains cracked where sudden heat had split them. In the far south, the Nile still kept its head hidden beneath a cloak of silt, remembering the fire that had chased it. Even when the rains returned and the fields grew green again, the earth carried those marks like faint handwriting that time refused to erase. Among mortals, the story traveled quickly, from shepherds on lonely hills to sailors steering by the stars. They told of the boy who drove the sun, and of the day the sky itself nearly burned away. Mothers warned their children in hushed tones. Pride can blind, and even love cannot soften the laws of the world. Fathers spoke more quietly still, for they knew what it is to grant a dangerous wish. Helios rose again the next morning, as duty demanded. The horses took their places, the axle sang, and daylight returned to the waiting earth. But behind the steady glow lingered a grief that no dawn could warm. Every time the chariot passed above the Eridanus, and Helios heard the swan's lone song, he turned his gaze away, though the sound followed him across the sky. And so the lesson of Phaethon endured, not as a scolding etched in stone, but as a whisper carried on wind and water, that the desire to be seen can burn brighter than the wisdom to stay safe. That even a god's promise cannot outshine the danger of a single reckless dream, and that love, however fierce, must sometimes watch from a distance while the world learns what it cannot unlearn. Night gathered fully. The poplars gleamed with their slow-falling tears of amber, each drop a memory of light. Cycnus, now holy swan, glided through the dark water and sang to the stars. His voice, neither grief nor comfort alone, became the evening's final note. High above, the heavens resumed their quiet turning. The constellations settled back into their ancient patterns. The middle course of the sun held steady once more. And the earth, scarred and wiser, turned gently toward another dawn. Long before anyone tried to drive the sun's chariot, there was a girl who just wanted to understand how it worked. Her name was Thalia, and she lived on the island of Rhodes. Every morning she would sit on the beach and watch Helios drive his golden chariot across the sky. While other people went about their daily work, Thalia stayed right there, watching. "What are you doing?" her friends would ask. "Learning," she'd say. Learning what? How he does it. How he makes the light spread so evenly. How he knows exactly when to rise and when to set. Her friends thought she was wasting her time. But Thalia's father, a fisherman, understood his daughter's curiosity. "She's always been this way," he told his wife. "Remember when she was little? She'd spend hours watching how the waves moved, trying to figure out the pattern." "This is different," his wife said. "She's watching the sun god himself. What if he notices? What if he gets angry?" But Helios had already noticed, and he wasn't angry. In fact, he was curious. For weeks, he'd seen this small figure sitting on the beach, tracking his movements across the sky. No prayers, no offerings, no requests for favors, just attention. It had been a long time since anyone had watched him work with such genuine interest. So one morning, instead of continuing his usual path across the sky, Helios stopped his chariot directly above the island of Rhodes. The sudden halt sent ripples of confusion across the world. In Egypt, farmers looked up in bewilderment as their shadows stopped moving. In Troy, merchants paused mid-negotiation, wondering why time seemed to have frozen. But on the beach in Rhodes, Thalia just smiled. "I wondered when you'd stop to talk," she called up to the sky. A warm, golden voice drifted down from above. "You've been watching me." "Every day for 3 months," Thalia confirmed. "I hope you don't mind." "Mind? Child, no one has paid attention to my actual work in centuries. They pray for good weather, they blame me for droughts, but no one ever just watches. Why?" Thalia stood up and shaded her eyes to look up at the chariot. She couldn't see Helios clearly from so far away, but she could feel his presence. "Because it's beautiful," she said, "the way you spread the light. It's not random at all, is it? There's a pattern, a rhythm, like music, but with brightness." There was a moment of silence from above. Then, to Thalia's amazement, the golden chariot began to descend. It landed gently on the beach. Sand turned to glass from the heat. The 4 fire horses snorted and stamped, but they seemed calm. And there was Helios himself, tall, radiant, but somehow not overwhelming to look at. "You see the pattern?" he asked. "I think so," Thalia said. "You don't just move the sun, you're painting with light. Every day is different, but there's still a structure underneath it all." Helios smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd had in years. "Would you like to learn?" For the next several hours, while the rest of the world experienced the longest morning in recorded history, Helios taught Thalia the fundamentals of solar magic. It wasn't about raw power, he explained. Any fool could make something bright and hot. The real skill was in the subtlety. "Watch," he said, making a small sun appear in his palm. "This is morning light. See how it's softer? It wakes people up gradually." Thalia studied the miniature sun carefully. "It's warmer than it looks." Exactly. Morning light should feel like hope, like possibility. He made the light change. "This is noon light, stronger, more direct. It's meant to energize, to help things grow." "And evening light?" Thalia asked. Helios created a third small sun, this one golden and mellow. Evening light should feel like completion, like satisfaction after a day's work. "Can I try?" Helios was surprised. In all his centuries, no mortal had ever asked to create light magic. But something about this girl's genuine curiosity made him want to share his knowledge. "Hold out your hands," he said. Thalia cupped her palms together. Helios placed his hands over hers, and she felt warmth flow through her fingers. "Don't try to make it bright," he instructed. "Try to make it kind." Thalia focused, and a small, gentle light appeared in her hands. It wasn't as brilliant as Helios's sun's, but it had something his lacked, a distinctly human warmth. "Remarkable," Helios said. "Mortal light has a different quality entirely. It's personal." "What do you mean?" "Divine light is perfect, but it's the same for everyone. Your light adapts. It becomes what the person looking at it needs to see." Thalia looked down at the light in her hands. As she watched, it shifted slightly, becoming exactly the right brightness for her eyes. "I could teach people this," she said quietly. "Teach them what?" "How to make their own light. Small lights, for when the day gets too dark. Not to replace your sun," she added quickly, "but to supplement it during the hard times." Helios considered this. "You would share what I've taught you?" "If you'd let me. People get scared when the days grow short. They worry that the sun won't come back. If they could make a little light of their own, maybe they wouldn't be so afraid." "And you wouldn't keep this power for yourself?" Thalia looked at him like he'd asked if she wanted to stop breathing. what would be the point of that? Light is meant to be shared. That's when Helios knew he'd made the right choice. From that day forward, Thalia became the first teacher of light magic. Not the grand cosmic kind that moved the sun across the sky, but the small personal kind that helped people through dark moments. She taught children how to make tiny lights to comfort them during thunderstorms. She showed farmers how to create gentle glows to check on their animals at night. She helped fishermen learn to make soft beacons that would guide them home without scaring away the fish. The magic was never flashy or dramatic. It was practical, helpful, kind. And Helios, watching from his chariot each day, felt prouder of this one student than he'd felt about anything in decades. People began to notice that the sunlight itself seemed warmer on the island of Rhodes, more personal, more caring. It's because the sun has a friend there, travelers would say, someone who understands his work. Thalia continued her daily vigil on the beach, but now it was different. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was learning, practicing, improving. And sometimes, when Helios passed overhead, he would adjust his light slightly, making it a little softer for her elderly neighbors, a little stronger for the crops that needed extra help. It was a partnership between mortal and God, based on mutual respect and genuine curiosity. Thalia never tried to drive the sun's chariot. She never demanded greater power or recognition. She was content to be a student, to learn a little more each day, and to share what she learned with anyone who needed it. And when people asked her what it was like to learn from the sun god himself, she would just smile and say, "He's an excellent teacher, very patient, and he genuinely cares about his work." Years later, when Thalia was old and gray, she still sat on the beach each morning. But now she was surrounded by her own students, children and adults who wanted to learn the gentle art of making light. On her last morning, as she felt her strength fading, Thalia looked up at Helios passing overhead. "Thank you," she called out, "for sharing your knowledge, for trusting me with it." The response came as a warm breeze that seemed to carry words. "Thank you for reminding me why the work matters." When Thalia died, something beautiful happened. Every person she'd taught how to make light created a small glow in her honor. Thousands of tiny, personal lights flickered across the island of Rhodes, creating a constellation on Earth that could be seen from the heavens. And Helios, driving his chariot across the sky, smiled, because he finally understood what mortal light was really for. It wasn't meant to replace the sun. It was meant to help people remember that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way to create a little warmth. The light-making tradition continued on Rhodes for generations, and sometimes, when the days grew short and people felt scared, they would remember Thalia's lesson. Light is meant to be shared. Even today, when you light a candle or turn on a lamp during a difficult time, you're following in the footsteps of that curious girl who just wanted to understand how the sun worked. And maybe, if you pay attention, you'll notice that the light seems a little warmer, a little more personal than it should be. That's Thalia's gift, still working after all these centuries. Before humans knew fire, they lived in cold caves and ate raw meat. They huddled together when the sun went down, waiting for morning to bring warmth again. But there was one girl who refused to accept this. Her name was Pyrrha, and she lived in a village at the foot of Mount Olympus. Every night she would climb the highest hill and stare up at the mountain, watching the gods' fires flicker between the clouds. "Why do they get to stay warm?" she asked her grandmother one evening. "Why do we have to freeze?" Her grandmother shook her head. "Fire belongs to the gods, child. It's not meant for us." But Pyrrha disagreed. She'd noticed something the others hadn't. Sometimes, when lightning struck the mountainside, small fires would start in the dry grass. They'd burn for a few moments before dying out in the wind. "Fire doesn't belong to anyone," she told herself. "It just needs the right home." So Pyrrha began her experiments. She tried rubbing sticks together like she'd seen woodpeckers do. Nothing. She tried striking stones against each other. Still nothing. She even tried catching lightning in clay pots during storms. Her village thought she was losing her mind. "Leave the girl alone," her grandmother told the others. "She'll figure it out eventually." But Pyrrha wasn't figuring it out. Winter was coming, and people were starting to get sick from the cold. The old ones especially. Children cried through the night, too cold to sleep. That's when Pyrrha made a decision that would change everything. She would climb Mount Olympus itself and ask the gods for help. "You can't," her grandmother said when Pyrrha told her the plan. "Mortals don't belong on the mountain. The gods will strike you down." "Maybe," Pyrrha said, "but maybe they'll listen." She packed what little food she had and started climbing at dawn. The mountain was steep and rocky. Her hands bled from grabbing onto sharp stones. Her feet hurt from walking on uneven ground. But she kept going. Halfway up, she met a wolf. The wolf was old and gray, with bright yellow eyes. It watched her for a long moment, then started walking beside her. "Are you climbing to see the gods too?" she asked the wolf. The wolf didn't answer, but it stayed with her. As they climbed higher, the air got thinner. Pyrrha had to stop and rest more often. The wolf would wait patiently beside her, sometimes sharing its warmth. "You know what it's like to be cold," she told the wolf. "That's why you're helping me." Near the top of the mountain, they found a cave. Inside the cave was the strangest sight Pyrrha had ever seen. A pool of water that glowed like the sun. "What is that?" she whispered. The wolf walked to the edge of the pool and looked back at her. Its yellow eyes seemed to say, "This is what you came for." Pyrrha approached carefully. The water was warm, but not hot. It gave off light without burning anything around it. "This is fire in its purest form," said a voice behind her. She turned around and saw an old woman standing at the cave entrance. The woman wore simple clothes and had kind eyes. "Are you a goddess?" Pyrrha asked. "I'm Hestia," the woman said. goddess of the hearth, and you're the girl who's been trying to make fire." Pyrrha nodded. "My people are cold. The children cry at night. I thought—" "You thought maybe the gods would help." "Yes." Hestia walked to the pool and cupped some of the glowing water in her hands. "Fire is dangerous, child. It can warm your home or burn it down. It can cook your food or destroy your crops. Are you sure your people are ready for such power?" Pyrrha thought about her village, the old ones getting sicker, the children crying, her grandmother's hands blue with cold. "They need warmth more than they need safety," she said. Hestia smiled. "That's the right answer." She held out her hands, and the glowing water began to change. It became smaller, brighter, more concentrated. "This is an ember from the first fire," Hestia said. "It will never go out as long as you treat it with respect. Feed it dry wood, and it will grow. Give it air, and it will dance. But never forget, fire serves those who serve it." Pyrrha cupped her hands, and Hestia placed the ember inside. It was warm, not hot, like holding a piece of the sun. "How do I make more?" Pyrrha asked. "You'll figure it out," Hestia said. "Fire teaches those who pay attention." The wolf led Pyrrha back down the mountain. When she reached her village, everyone gathered around to see what she'd brought back. "It's just a glowing coal," someone said. "It's not even that bright," said another. But Pyrrha's grandmother understood immediately. She brought dry twigs and dead leaves. "Show us, child." Pyrrha gently blew on the ember and fed it the twigs. The ember grew brighter. The twigs caught fire. Soon they had a real flame dancing in their midst. For the first time in their lives, the villagers felt truly warm. "How did you do it?" they asked. "I asked nicely," Pyrrha said. From that night forward, fire lived among humans. Pyrrha taught others how to keep it alive, how to make new fires from old ones. She showed them how to build hearths that wouldn't burn down their homes. And whenever someone made their first fire, they would sometimes see a gray wolf watching from the edge of the forest, with bright yellow eyes that seemed to approve. Fire spread from village to village, warming homes and cooking food. Children stopped crying from the cold. The old ones lived longer, warmer lives. But Pyrrha never forgot Hestia's warning. She taught everyone the same lesson. Fire serves those who serve it. And on quiet nights, when the flames danced in their hearths, people would remember the girl who climbed a mountain to bring them warmth. The ember Hestia gave Pyrrha still burns today. Every fire that has ever existed came from that first flame. Every time you light a candle or start a campfire, you're holding a piece of the gift that a brave girl brought down from Mount Olympus. Fire doesn't belong to the gods or to humans. It belongs to anyone willing to tend it with care. And sometimes, if you listen closely to the crackling flames, you can still hear Pyrrha's voice, teaching the next generation how to keep the warmth alive. And that's all for tonight. I really hope you enjoyed it. I certainly had fun putting it together. If these stories are your thing, hitting subscribe would honestly mean everything to me. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from people all over the world who are as fascinated by these old myths as I am. Thanks for spending your evening with me. Sleep well, and until next time, good night.